These are the Beam Chronicles, with your host, MJ Dooney.
Book 2, Compromise. Chapter 3, Charlie Shayde.
I hated that the world loved me. But I couldn't much blame Tonto Smith, or whatever the fuck his name was, for trying to use my fame to jettison his own. It seemed like a smart enough ploy, given that I was probably the most popular girl on the planet and wouldn't exactly refute his claims when questioned about it directly. Nice concept, but I don't think he counted on my boys getting so damn chivalrous out of nowhere. I'm also sure Smith had no clue how heinous my schedule was. Eventually, he would have revealed one detail too many about our relationship, putting me in two places at once. I was fast, but not that fast. And the whole thing would unravel, fade, and die away. Just like all the rumors about my love life, I was simply too busy for most of them to be true. Most of them. Everyone's favorite one? That one actually had a bit of merit, it turned out. And speaking on my busy schedule, I did have 15 minutes, a rare substantial gap, for cool down after the Fischer presser. Phil had requested a few days ago that Ava plus Murphy meet up at his lab for some new tech demonstration, and those were usually pretty fun and useful, so we all quickly agreed. 15 minutes after all the Fischer stuff was over, we'd rendezvous on the top floor of HQ. 30 minutes if one of us died during the bust. That was a standard joke, allowing a 15-minute cushion for resurrection via the failsafe, the bittersweet source of our current immortality. Jackson was still the only one to ever use it, just the one time when he tried to be a dumbass, but regardless, the failsafe's influence loomed large. The possibility of eternal torture hung over our heads, motivating most of the things we did, including killing people and talking to Peter Cranston. Oh, right, we had to do that today, too. Because jackass Peter amended a PR meeting onto Phil's demo. He'd discovered over the past 2 years how fluid an equalizer's schedule can suddenly become when she wants to get out of something. Rarely, if ever, was Peter capable of scheduling anything without tacking it onto the end of something else that he already knew we'd all be attending, thus preventing us from squirreling away. Hell, I tried to squirrel anyway, but JT reminded me that it had been a while since Cranston had said anything to us collectively, mostly thanks to Jackson's own brilliant performances with the media. I didn't want Peter whining to Howie that we were being mean to him, and I figured Phil's demo might be rad enough to keep me interested through Peter's propaganda bullshit. So my schedule was packed as usual, but there was still the matter of those 15 minutes. Perhaps I could pop in for a fast one with Surfer Boy, but then I had a better idea of someone else to do that with. Somebody I liked a ton more. Plus, new. I grouped into Jackson's apartment, one floor below mine, raring to go. Asshole, he was on the phone. I sighed, checking the clock, then flopped into the chair closest to him on the couch, slouching as low as I could to indicate my exasperation. We had a limited window here, and I could usually count on him to be on the same page as me with this sort of thing. Apparently today I'd have to convince him, but not like that was ever all that hard. Mom? I mouthed, pointing to my own earpiece. He grabbed the speaker of his and mouthed back to me. Caraway. Of course. Jackson had a way of keeping the most unsettlingly civil relationship with his ex. When Prophet transferred her to head up the mountain branch, Maria and JT decided mutually that the distance would be too much to hold up their relationship. They broke up on good terms, maintained a steady friendship, but it still felt weird to me that he called her every day. Were I the jealous type, it probably would have actually bothered me, but I knew Caraway too well to be worried about anything devious. Today it was kind of encroaching on our sex time, though.
All right, well, I should probably get going, Maria. Charlie wants to talk to me about something.
Yes, talk. Lots of talking. He nodded, then looked up at me from the paperwork he was rushing through, sprawled out across the coffee table.
Maria says hi.
I twitched one corner of my mouth up in what had to be the fastest and most apathetic smile in the history of faces, but Jackson interpreted it well enough.
She says hi back. We miss you, Caraway. Visit soon. And stay safe, okay?
And he hung up. Why do you still call her, man? I asked when I was sure the call was clear.
Maria? She's my friend, Charlie. What, are you jealous?
I rolled my eyes and smirked.
Besides, she's lonely out there. Apparently the mountain branch doesn't share the same sense of camaraderie that Capital does. She misses us. You ought to call her too sometime.
Don't tell me what to do, jackass. She's been there, almost 2 years? She should probably start making friends. I'm ferberizing her. Let her self-soothe a little bit. Besides, I'll call her when Sydney calls her. I moved from my chair to the seat next to him, grabbing his thigh and initiating my seductive magic, but he ignored my suggestive overtones, kept scribbling away at his paperwork.
Sid called her yesterday.
I leaned my body in closer to him, began working my leg across his lap. Murphy then.
Murphy calls her once a week.
By now I was fully straddling him and brushed his hair out of his face to get a nice, uninhibited look at his brown eyes. It actually took this much forwardness for him to piece together my intentions, and he smiled now that he finally figured it out. Fucking idiot. Madman Mathis.
Is he allowed to use phones?
Jackson asked as I drew my mouth closer within centimeters of his. He rested his hands on the small of my back. Vasquez.
Vasquez died.
Oh, yeah. And then we were kissing. Jackson did this thing with his telekinetic powers where he just sort of cloaked me in them. And he did it all the time. Every time I entered the same room as him, actually, but it got so much more intense when we kissed. I asked him once or twice if he noticed he was doing it, and he swore it was completely unintentional, just his subconscious expressing itself or something. The first time I picked it up was right after Flyfoon, when he asked us to drink beer on the roof with him, but to be honest, I'm not sure when it started exactly. He'd probably been doing it forever, just more subtly, to a lesser degree, and it gradually built up to what it was today. Originally, I called it telepetting, mostly to be shitty, because Jackson loathed when I called it that. Eventually, I hated the word too. It was kind of masturbating, but also not super accurate, because to be honest, calling it petting or stroking or caressing didn't quite capture the feeling of what he was doing. First of all, it sounded so sexual, and it wasn't that. Furthermore, those words are all too physical, too concrete and hard. This didn't really compare to any earthly sensation I'd experienced before. It shouldn't be attached to a different word that already held some sort of meaning. We ran through a ton of other words for it, but none of them really had the staying power to stick in my memory. Eventually, it was Sydney that gave us the perfect word, albeit kind of accidentally. The way it happened was some baby showed up at work one day. Not by herself, a coworker whose name I'm sure I know. Some faceless pencil pusher at Bean, whom I just smiled at whenever she said hi. She had it, the baby, and came back from leave with said baby, and I didn't really care because babies creep me out. But Sydney was all over it, cuddling her and cradling her and cooing and making funny faces. And when the baby started to fuss, he soothed it almost instantly with this repetitive sound. IT. It worked. Babies are seriously so stupid. But I was struck by how unique it was, the soothing sound he made. IT. I asked him about it later. I guess it was Polish. Something people in Poland say to soothe babies. And the baby wasn't Polish, but I guess this random set of noises put her wrinkly, useless little peanut brain at instant ease. So we called it ITking now, which at least was obscure enough that it didn't remind us of anything else. That way my description of it would be the only way to lend clarity without any gross or weird preconceptions. I was always tempted to use the word warm to describe it, but it wasn't a temperature thing. It was more like a pulsing wave of ensured protection and soothing. Eye-teeking felt like somebody took the 5 minutes right before you fall asleep, snuggled under a blanket after a long day, and summed them all into one pure energy, then dumped that energy through my body again and again and again. It felt safe and revitalizing and purely blissful, like a rippling massage of my tiniest nerve endings, like I was literally blanketed in his affections, like nothing in the world was wrong. Best feeling ever. Sometimes I even found myself craving it when he wasn't near me. Of course, the incessant sound of a scribbling pen kind of cheapened the thrill. I pulled away from him, hesitant to derail the train again, but a little pissed off. What the fuck, bro? Are you seriously doing paperwork while you're kissing me? The downside of an easily distracted and telekinetic partner. You can never ensure his attention 100%. I glanced over my shoulder at the pen, propped upright by the anomalistic capacities of the world's dumbest multitasker, scribbling through the forms he was working on moments ago. He toppled it over when I looked, as if I hadn't already caught him red-handed, and I scowled at him disgustedly.
I'm sorry, Charlie. I just want to get all this Fischer stuff over and done with. This case, it really sucked, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mostly ignored. I reached back and ungrouped his pen, removing the distraction, and started kissing his neck. Pretty much over it and not wanting to waste more precious time.
You know, Maria says a guy with a bunch of 20-foot insect mechs applied to join Beam West like a week ago, already drawing up the press release implicating him in the Hodge assassination. Typical, right? Stomp out the embers of a threat, sew off my loose ends before they become anything. I bet you he forecasted it, that I would try to insinuate someone else was involved, you know?
Yep, I uttered, now completely ignoring him. He giggled and squirmed away a little bit.
I'm sorry? Is my super relevant conspiracy theory boring you?
No, it's just distracting you from fucking me, so I want you to shut up about it. The direct bluntness got him. He was mine at that point, powerless and snared. I could tell from the sudden increase in eye-teaking magnitude, but he continued his flimsy protests.
Wait, now?
Right now.
Charlie, we have like 15 minutes.
No, we had 15 minutes. Now we only have 10, so get to work.
We can't. We can't in 10 minutes.
Oh, sure we can. You're telekinetic, dipshit. Just gotta get creative, right?
Remember last time I got creative?
Yeah, I do.
You screamed so loud the whole building heard it.
Yeah, I did.
Charlie, I have a lot of things I need to focus on here.
I rested my hands on his shoulders and grouped us both into the bedroom. He landed on his back on the bed, me kneeling with a leg on either side of him, as I peeled my trench coat off and tossed it onto the ground. Why don't you focus on Charlie?
I'm gonna focus on Charlie.
He was focused. 10 minutes was plenty. Jackson and I started having sex about a year ago. I actually was the one who initiated it one day after a random bust, maybe 10 months after his breakup with Caraway. It just seemed like the thing to do, something we'd obviously both wanted forever. I got sick of him dragging his feet, so I asked, and we did it. Simple and amazing as that. And for a while afterward, we were too uncomfortable and uncertain about it to discuss what happened like mature adults. That didn't exactly prevent us from doing it a bunch more in the meanwhile, and it didn't take long before it got serious. Honestly, this whole time, both of us knew deep down we were doing something more significant than best friends who occasionally boned. Still, neither was in a rush to put labels on it, to stunt its growth, or whatever. It just felt so good to have something nice and easy and fun, unscripted, unscheduled, fucking unforecasted, that we just did together without complications. We liked each other a lot. And now we had sex, which was awesome. That was really all there was to it. Why muddy it up? It was still a secret, though, from everyone, and part of that, I guess, was the lingering awkwardness of those early days when we ourselves barely talked about it. At this point, I really wished we would tell Sydney, because if we were going to tell anyone, he was blatantly first on the list. Sid was not only our best friend, but a heavily empathetic individual and found vicarious happiness in other people's successes basically equal to their own happiness. I think if he discovered Jackson and I were happily building something like this together, he'd be nothing but supportive and excited about it. I honestly felt bad depriving him of that. It wasn't that we didn't trust him to keep the secret. It was more an issue of Sydney being a bit naive on things like that. The concept of fuck buddies was possibly outside of his realm of comprehension, and while JT and I were definitely more than that, we didn't want him treating us differently because he thought we were going to get married and have children now. Plus, we didn't really have a better justification for why we'd kept it from him for so long to begin with, which I realize is like a self-fulfilling Mobius strip kind of snowball problem where every day we didn't tell him was an additional day's worth of required reasons for not telling him. Whatever. We had other less paradoxical and stupid excuses for keeping quiet. The last thing we wanted was for the press to find out about it. If the paparazzi weren't mad enough already, I couldn't imagine how tenacious they'd get when the news hit that Jackson and I were an item. Goodbye, privacy. That would definitely classify as a complication, and if this thing wasn't strong enough to withstand the force of the tabloid media, I didn't want to find out. I couldn't speak for Jackson, but I wanted to give it a shot at becoming something a little more robust before I'd subjected it to all of that. Besides, imagine Cranston's reaction, fucking nightmare. I think the biggest reason we kept quiet about our escapades was profit. It was notoriously difficult to keep secrets from him, being precognitive and all, but it had gotten much simpler recently. With Beam's continental expansion and Prophet's duties at all of the other branches, he was much more absent. I hadn't even seen the man in 2 months. Even considering this absence, we had to take every necessary precaution to keep the knowledge of our relationship away from Beam's leader. Howie was hard to predict, but if he wanted to, he had ways of making us do or not do just about anything. I would go to some extreme lengths, commit unspeakable horrors, all that just to hold on to whatever this was I had with Jackson. I knew it, but I didn't want Prophet to test those limits. If there was something in your life you considered precious or important, your best bet at holding onto it was not letting Prophet know it mattered to you. And obviously he'd catch wind of it eventually, and then we'd have to discuss how badly we wanted to fight for it, if he decided to be against it for whatever shitty reason. But for now, it was free, without struggle and uncomplicated, so probably best just enjoy that part while it lasted. If we had to keep it a secret to keep it simple, or to flat out keep it, that's what we were gonna do. Now, it was pretty easy to keep secrets when we had anomalistic capacities. For example, I grouped up to the lab ahead of Jackson, already started meaningless small talk with Phil and Murphy when he arrived with Sid a few seconds later. You'd never guess by the casual greeting I gave him that not a minute ago I was, screwing him. Hell, we didn't even arrive together.
I think I'm just gonna start, actually.
Phil muttered once we were all present, minus Peter, glancing around the assembly for some sort of permission.
Go ahead, kid.
Murphy, ranking member in the room, gave him the approval he was looking for.
Cranston doesn't need to see this anyway. No use waiting up for him.
What does this concern, brother?
Phil wheeled his chair away from the wall of computer monitors and walked toward one of the big garage doors that lined the walls of his labs, like the spokes of a cog, alternating with windows, all while grinning like a fool and rubbing his hands together.
You know that a-hole, Tyler Foon? I know how to hit him now.
It was big enough news to get all four of us pretty excited almost immediately, even though I had my suspicions we'd be discussing this topic. Finding a way to thwart a full blue Foon had become Phil's most important and challenging task. See, Foon had spent 2 years rotting in our dungeons, but prior to that impressive streak, he'd made a habit of busting out. True, both times he had helped, a wayward rogue equalizer the first time and the fly the second. But it was still unsettling how difficult it proved to lock Tyler down, specifically when he was a beach trip away from taking over the whole world. And we had thus far made zero progress on an effective battle strategy post-smack. Tyler was invulnerable given the right amount of water absorption, and were it not for a well-timed blast of KPC, my unprecedented grouping of another person, and a literal truckload of dumb luck, he would have had us the last time we fought.
All right, let me show you what I got.
Phil eagerly interrupted our excitement, pressing a button on the keypad to open the garage he was standing in front of. The door lifted to reveal some weird, gelatinous sort of teal mannequin, and beside that some sick-looking rods with long, spiky coils of wire on top of them. Weapons? I left it to Phil to explain.
So, if you guys care for the methods at all?
Tell us, brother.
Sydney assured him before I could suggest the exact opposite.
We will try to keep up.
Phil grinned. We all knew bragging about the difficulty was half of the fun in unveiling a new discovery, but that didn't mean I wanted to hear it. Whatever.
Well, the dummy was the hard part, actually. That's my model to represent Foon, and it's synthetic, but super accurate physiologically.
The cow looks like him.
JT smirked, circling around the goo man.
Yeah, I made a cast of his face, actually. And that was a ball. He hated it, getting hand-pressed into plaster like that, but there wasn't much he could do, all dry and corpsey.
Right.
JT laughed, pointing at the dummy's scowl.
Looks like he was super enjoying himself. I can almost hear him pissing about it. Oi, mate. Get your hands off me, mate. You can't do that to me, mate.
Cheerio, jolly good, pip.
Phil waited until we all stopped our exaggerated, borderline offensive imitations of Foon's famous British grunts of protest and discomfort before he continued.
Anyway, I couldn't tackle this problem without replicating his process of water absorption for experimentation. He does that consciously, makes a decision to take up water, so motivating him to do it while I observe was impossible. He's not exactly a cooperative son of a bitch, and I obviously couldn't give him the amount of water he'd need to voluntarily take it in, so there's a bunch I still don't understand, like where it all goes once he's got it, but before he shoots it, for example. But my big breakthrough came from Enzo Skeleton.
The fly? You talked to him?
No, I used his eyes. The shattered remnants of Fly's eyes contain just enough data on Foon to reverse engineer a plastic with similar properties to his skin that I could do tests on. Brilliant tech, by the way, the eyes. Astoundingly complex, Kevorkian-esque if they were biological. Too bad somebody busted them up into teeny tiny little pieces.
Jackson grumbled an insincere apology for basically saving the world.
But anyway, between Fly's data and my tests on the synthetic, I managed to figure out a lot about how he manipulates the water he's absorbed. The process is intricate.
He gestured toward a stack of papers almost as tall as him, his notes on the subject.
But it's basically just electromagnetic interactions driving the whole thing. So if we zap him with electricity, it jacks him up, even full blue. A sufficient shock confuses his cells. Bigger, he'll drop the water he's firing. Bigger yet, we can vaporize it right out of him.
He meandered into the garage and grabbed one of the maces, plugging it into his belly button, and opened a roof hatch to let the sun in, striking his chloroplastic green skin.
100%.
So at this point, it was just a matter of cranking up the voltage to where it won't just tickle, which necessitated a big-ass battery, which is basically me, right?
He unplugged the device from his navel and cocked it over his shoulder like a baseball bat.
Okay, here's the show. You guys ready?
Phil took a deep breath, then in one fluid motion, swung the mace into the mannequin as he flicked a switch on the side of it. Big, loud arcs of electricity crackled around the coil of wire at the end, only for the briefest of seconds before he powered it back down. The dummy, struck with the lightning stick, hissed as steam came out from the point of impact, and the faint blue color quickly drained away.
Ta-da!
That, I grabbed the electromace out of his hands, is the best shit I've seen in this room. Electricity sticks, specifically for killing Tyler Foon. Oh, Murphy, can we let him out right now? I gasped excitedly. Let's let Tyler out, give him a drink, and then wail on him with these babies until he cries. Can we, Murph?
Charlie, you know I'd be all for it, but I don't think the others would appreciate it. Better to just leave him alone, you know?
I shrugged and hoisted it above my head, to instead take out my frustrations on his plastic lookalike.
Wait. The only issue is it's bananas high voltage.
Phil cautiously explained when he realized the fire in my eyes and my intentions.
Like, not a purse taser, all right? It'll rip the skin off of you if you're not careful. But yeah, I'll hold down that button to charge it up, then flick the switch and swing simultaneously.
It was all the more instruction I needed, beating the mannequin across the top of his skull with the lightning bolt on a stick and grinning ear to ear as I watched the blue run out of Foon Replica's stupid head, drifting away as harmless steam. I couldn't stop myself from giggling triumphantly as I spun the mace in my hands a bit. Hell yes! But it kind of sputtered out.
Yeah, if the safety's on, it won't run for long because it's totally uninsulated, and I don't want it to arc back up your arm. Oh yeah, I rigged up some fuel cells to power them, so I don't need to be around if you're fighting the real Foon, but they'll lose juice super quickly, probably 4 or 5 strikes per mace pending your gusto. After that, you'll have to bring them back to me to recharge.
Phil, I want one.
well, that one's actually yours, Charlie. I figured they'd be more valuable if you took one home and sixed it for a few days so you could group it with you.
Smart thinking. My impatient boredom immediately got the better of me. I cold turkey attempted a full process group of the electromace before I'd done much sixing on it at all. And after I'd broken it down into particle dust and thrown it back together, what I was holding looked like the electromace, but when I flicked the switch a few times, nothing came out. Phil, I broke it. He sighed and snatched it away from me.
You can take the other one, but don't group it until you're sure you got it. You understand? They're hell to put together. These two shocked me about 50 times each.
He shuffled out of the garage compartment into an adjacent one, twisting out some screws of the electromace I'd just wrecked.
It is my turn, Charlie.
Sydney insisted, striding toward the other mace that I was already considering grouping just to mess with Phil. I instead grabbed it off the ground and tossed it. Sydney, in one fluid motion, snatched the weapon out of the air, spun a complete rotation, backhandedly blasting the Foondal across the face with the business end of it. I wasn't entirely sure if this strike had the intended demoisturizing effect, because Foon's head dislodged and ricocheted off the wall of the garage, then back into the center of the lab. Jackson hit the deck just in time to avoid getting hit in the face with another face.
A little overzealous there, Big Purple.
He smirked from the floor, and Sid reached out a hand to help him up.
My apologies, Jackson. That was most cathartic.
He gripped the electromace affectionately.
These things are fantastic. Brother, I trust you have another doll for us to hit.
Yeah, I do have another, but
Phil muttered from the garage next door.
that's my last one, and they're also hard to make, so if you would all just stop breaking my shit, all right?
I grouped over to the room he was in, half to congratulate him, half because I wanted to seem guilty about breaking the mace. It was clear this garage was where Phil kept all his bits and pieces of unfinished work, the other Foon dummy, incomplete or defective catches, tools, and scrap metal, and a brain floating in a jar. It caught my attention instantly, and when he realized what I was looking at, he winced like it was something I wasn't supposed to see. It's not me, is it? I smirked. Obviously not. Howie wouldn't trust Phil with the only thing tethering me to him, my disembodied radio-enabled brain in a jar.
No, well, I guess that's my next first priority now that I got this Foon thing settled. Howie wanted me to try to replicate the conditions of your brain, Charlie.
And the tone of his voice plus his wince indicated that he was sorry this was how I discovered the project, like he somehow owed it to me to have mentioned it beforehand, like having it hidden in this junk drawer was a violation of trust between us. I didn't care. True, the threat of Howie shutting my brain down if I disobeyed was my primary motivation to obey. Seeing a brain in a jar reminded me of how trapped I was. That sucked, but I didn't really give a shit if Phil was investigating how it worked. It's not like we were super good friends who told each other everything either. What for? I asked in my most polite conversational tone. Why does he want to replicate it?
Well, I guess some other equalizers like the idea of having a disposable body, like they can do more reckless things with it, be a brain after it's destroyed, then have their consciousness installed into a different body later.
Idiots.
Jackson scowled from outside the garage, watching us with Sid and Murph. Yeah, I feigned a smile. Everyone wants to be me, except me.
It doesn't matter, anyway.
Phil assured, leaning the broken electro mace against the brain for later and dusting off his hands.
I'm several years away from my next greatest hit if this is what it has to be. You know how hard it is to keep a brain alive just floating in a jar? Then factor in the whole self-sufficient biosphere thing that Kowarski has going. Never mind all the communication paraphernalia, which is, a royal circus. Plus, I can't even read half his notes, since I still can't translate his weirdo language very well. I'm not close. That's my point. That was not even a real brain. I'm sorry to even bring it up, Charlie.
I shook my head. I'm not worried, Phil. It's whatever. It's a Howie thing. Don't feel bad about it. Phil was in no position to refuse helping Howie. I guess he was far from unique in that, but if he were ever to stand up to him, it'd probably be over something a bit more heinous than this. Dealing with Prophet was all about shades of gray, something this tame wasn't a blip on the radar.
Well, golly, what did I miss?
Peter asked as he finally stepped into the room, speaking of heinous.
Cranston, you're late, as usual.
Oh, come on now, Murphy. No need to bust my chops about a little tardiness. Besides, I figured old Philly wouldn't mind if I missed his little demo, right? Not like it concerned public relations at all.
I could show you how it works really quickly if you'd like, Peter. I threatened in my best mock sweet tone. My joke missed its mark, but Jackson and Sydney laughed.
Well, thank you for the offer, Blue Eyes.
He obtusely responded. I almost hit him. Every time he called me that, he was right on the cusp of losing a few teeth, but I maintained composure. Peter was Howie's guy, and I too couldn't cross Howie without consequences.
But I'll just get on to my thing. Hopefully it shouldn't take too long. Just a couple notes from the presser, and then a special request out of you.
He pointed at me. Get that finger out of my face if you want to keep it. I growled, taking a seat between Jackson and Sid on the other end of the lab. Jackson sneakily grabbed my hand under the seat and gave it a quick squeeze, and the IT King picked up just the little bit of steam it needed to relax away my rage at the phony tool's very presence. As Murphy stood behind, staring boredly out the window, and Phil began working on his computer off to the side, Peter dragged a single chair across from us, crossed his legs as he sat on it, and began flipping through his notes for the day.
First of all, Sydney, good work.
Sydney pumped his fist. Obviously, it was bullshit. Even Sid knew that. But this was all Peter ever said to him after a presser anymore, because he knew from experience any advice or notes would be taken exaggeratedly to heart. It was better to just let Sydney do Sydney, even if that meant throwing a chair, threatening to murder a reporter, the stuff he did today. Usually, Sydney good work was followed up by Charlie talk. Today he went with...
Charlie, not precisely what I had in mind all of those times I asked you to talk.
Got it, Pete. Hot tip. I'll go back to silence then. He sighed and set his sights on JT.
Okay, let's see.
Jackson always caught the brunt of the flack because Peter knew it was the only place he could distribute advice and have it be adequately heated. And today, after Jackson dropped the fuck bomb, plus a few more lewd, out-of-character behaviors, not to mention the stunt he pulled with that Patrick did, Peter was in no mood to pull punches, telling him specific facial expressions that made him look weird, or answers in which his voice cracked, all kinds of shitty things to call a person's attention to. Jackson would just nod and take mental notes of it and agree with everything Peter said, promising to improve. I knew Jackson only did all of it for Sid and me. He put on the show and he played the role and he hammed it up because without him being perfectly likable, Howie would have forced us to do the same thing. He allowed me to remain silent by absorbing all of Cranston's garbage. And it wasn't like I hadn't done my fair share of shitty things for Jackson, killing people, but I hated that the most genuine guy I'd ever met had to stoop to these lows at all. That he was doing it for me just made it all the more sour. It took a solid hour for Peter to stop brutally nitpicking him. By then I was essentially furious.
Well, I think that'll just about do me for today's notes.
Peter flipped through them one last time to make sure he'd thoroughly exhausted his list of super important thoughts.
But I did actually want to talk to you all about something else. Endorsements.
Did you say endorsements?
Phil sprang up in his seat, up to now ignoring us, but suddenly very interested.
Now wait just a minute, I didn't mean...
But Phil disregarded Cranston's objection, and the room went dark but a single screen, the largest of the collection. You simply couldn't talk about Beam commercials in front of Phil without him playing the ad Sydney starred in a few months ago. The scene was simple. A wooden table and a chair against a black background with our purple friend sitting at it. On the table, a box, compact, cardboard, and within that box, 4 chicken nuggets. Sydney stared into the lens of a camera for 3 seconds before prying open the box, removing a single nugget, tossing it into his mouth, chewing it, and swallowing it.
I love chicken nuggets.
His deep, monotonous voice pierced through the otherwise still air. He reached into the box for a second as the Brandon logo sprawled across his face. He was the greatest commercial ever. Jackson, Murphy, and I applauded thunderously as Sydney sheepishly looked at his boots.
A riveting performance, was it not?
Sydney, you made me believe that you love chicken nuggets, you know? I punched his arm and he smirked, as if I didn't know that 75% of Sid Cavorsi's caloric intake was chicken nuggets. The other 25% was an assortment of canned pastas.
Yeah, laugh it up, you bunch of goofballs.
Ooh, Cranston broke out his manly, stern voice, which was basically the most hilarious, pathetic thing I'd ever heard.
But that ad netted us a cool mint, all right? We got t-shirt deals off of that one. The royalties alone could feed a family of 4.
Yeah, and then instead we use them to kill people.
JT muttered, so that only the two of us could hear it.
Anyway, Howie wants us to do a new commercial, some car company. Honestly, I forgot which one he ended up going with. He specifically requested Charlie.
Fucking no! I said in my most enthusiastic sing-songy cheerleader voice, rhythmically extending a fist into the air.
Oh, come on, Blue Eyes. You haven't really even given it any thought yet. Dressing up and posing for the camera, it could be fun.
I ignored everything he said, as usual. Peter, logically, why the hell would any of us be in a car commercial? None of us drive. We don't even have licenses. Jackson can fly. I can group around the world in a second. I don't know shit about cars. Why would anyone buy a car because I told them to?
Who cares? You're a celebrity.
I sneered, folding my arms and looking away. Right, ask me if I want to be.
All right, Charlie. Here it goes. I'm gonna say it.
He feigned concern poorly, adjusting himself forward so that he could lean in and grab my chin. Turn my head to meet his beady little eyes. If it weren't for the subconscious support Jackson was radiating through me, calming my nerves, I would have ungrouped his whole body just for touching me. Instead, I let him take a deep breath before plunging into his practiced bullshit.
Now, I know you put on this whole tough girl display to shield people from what you have going on inside, and I'm not gonna invade that. I don't want to push you into something that's gonna make you upset. But I think it's maybe about time for you to start being an adult and caring a little bit about what people think of you. I I've waited a really long time for you to just find that maturity on your own, but I'm starting to think you'll never get there without a little help. Now, this commercial, it might just be the perfect chance for you to step out of your comfort zone a little. Who knows? Maybe you'll enjoy yourself, because all of us on the upper floors, we're just worried, that's all. We want the world to see that the kind of gal you are and just love you the way we love you, you know?
I kept my arms folded, disdainfully blinking at him to prevent myself from drawing Guillermo and shooting him in the face. A full 3 seconds later, Jackson was the first to respond, an audible snort and a cocked eyebrow.
For the record, I don't give two half shits.
Thank you, Murphy.
If I constitute an upper floors person, that is.
Do I count? Technically, I'm on the most upper floor. I also don't care. Hell, your personality kind of sucks ass, frankly.
You don't count, obviously.
And I'd recommend avoiding commercials for a while. You can't follow up, Sydney.
Right, Charlie, you are a very pretty girl. You stand no chance against my legendary charisma and enthusiasm.
Sydney explained, patting my leg in comfort.
You know, I'm glad you all think this is just one big joke, all right?
Peter jumped to his feet, apparently getting a little pissy.
But you'd think you would all care a bit more about how the world sees her if you liked her so much.
Actually, Peter, her approval rating is always pretty high. Maybe she's not what you want her to be, but it's not like people dislike her. They could just accept the whole grumpy, stubborn, tough thing.
Yeah, well, that's a theory, or maybe her approval rating is just directly proportional to the curvature of her...
Hey, Pete, it's a bad crowd for that.
Jackson stood up suddenly, towering over Cranston's tiny body, glaring him down. Peter gulped, physically swallowing the words left on his lips.
Sorry.
Cowardly little pusswad.
I didn't intend to...
I'll do the commercial. Tell Prophet Charlie's schedule's too full.
I reached out to touch his arm. JT, you don't have to...
Yeah, I do. I'm doing it.
Jackson, thank you, but Howie wants Charlie, and you've already got 3 ads next month.
Well, now I got 4. I'll make it work.
Actually, bud, there's a little something I gotta talk to you about after this is over that might lock up your schedule even more.
And I was gonna have you do that exclusive interview with Hugh Conrad that he requested on the topic of smacks during the week that they wanted to shoot. I've already penciled you in for it. It's simply not movable. It's the times.
It's fine, guys. It's all fine. I'll just have a few busy weeks. Whatever it takes, I'll find the room.
Jackson reassured, frustration only detectable to those who knew him best.
We could cancel your trip back home.
Cranston suggested as he kept leafing through JT's schedule.
Visiting your mom in 2 weeks, we could push one of the ads into those days if you don't take the time off.
Right. Yeah. Do whatever you have to do.
Wait, no, stop. That was the last straw for me. It was too much, sitting right there. I didn't mind him taking blows for me from the media and the paparazzi, even from Cranston himself, but I didn't want to let Jackson do this commercial, not visit his mom, just because I was too big of a baby to buck up and do it myself. Besides, if Sid's was any indication, all I had to do was show up, and by virtue of being who I was, people will go apeshit over it. Furthermore, Howie had requested me for it directly, picking my battles, shades of gray, all that. It was a good idea to start collecting brownie points and owed favors from Prophet, especially the ones that had come this easy. Hopefully, between the two of us, JT and I could accrue enough of them to keep him out of the one thing that made us truly happy anymore. In any case, I wasn't about to punish Jackson for my own insecurities about celebrity any more than I already had. Yeah, I hated that the world loved me, but I loved that Jackson did. I'll do it. Don't cancel his time off. He loves his mom. I can take one of the 4. Whatever, as long as it's easy. 1 day of shooting, all right?
Deal. That is very negotiable. Thank you for stepping up, Charlie. It means a lot to me.
I sure as all fuck did not do it for you, Cranston. Make sure you let Howie know that I agreed to it, all right?
I will. I will let him know the next time I speak to him. Thanks for the assembly, all. Good work today, and go team.
He pumped his fist and chuckled privately, glancing around the room. Nobody acknowledged it. He awkwardly hustled out. The 3 of us said our goodbyes to Phil, already distracted, back to work on fixing the broken electromace, and then waited for the next elevator to take us down. Jackson and Murphy stepped off 2 floors later, apparently needing to discuss some other vital piece of the beam pie, leaving me alone with Sydney. We rode quietly for a while, well beyond the point in our friendship that required constant conversation without things being uncomfortable. I nose laughed as I leaned my head against his arm, exhausted, as I usually was by this point in the day, and his stocky, enormous body had a way of physically reminding me how supported I was. I asked him, "Any acting tips, Olivier?" He grinned, then leaned over, whispering, at least to the best of his ability, into my ear.
The tip is that I was not acting, Charlie. I just actually do love chicken nuggets.
Well, damn me straight to the banks of the river Styx, Kavorsky. You could have knocked me over with a fucking feather.
Thank you for listening to the Beam Chronicles, a fiction podcast written and produced by me, MJ Dooney. Today, the day that I'm posting this, is my birthday, so if you'd like to give me a birthday present, one thing you can do is give me a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or really wherever you're hearing this. Alternatively, if you've already done that but you still want to get me something, an email would be great, beamchronicles@gmail.com. Tell me how you're liking the show. All feedback is welcome. Social media is still not super active, but you can give me a follow or subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok if you'd like to do that as well. All music and sound effects were sourced from the Epidemic Sound Library. Special thanks to Sergio Duarte for creating the cover art for this podcast, and thanks again for listening.